Welcome to Unit 3, Fractions, Decimals, and Percents. Now we will start this unit by looking at some decimal equivalents of fractions you have done before, like how 1/2 is equal to 0.5. We'll also look at creating equivalent fractions, so two fractions that are equal. 6/8, for example, is the same as 3/4. Here we call that reducing. Now when we move on to the next section and look at decimals, we'll be ordering decimals, putting them from least to greatest, or comparing two decimals to see which one is bigger or smaller than the other. So for example, 1.34 is less than 1.4. Then after ordering, comparing decimals, we'll do the same things with fractions. Then we'll compare decimals and fractions together, and we can use number lines to do that. We can look at place value, we'll create equivalent fractions, and other manipulatives. We'll continue our work with decimals by performing operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And then we'll combine all of these operations together to simplify an expression like this. Now when we simplify, we got to figure out what we do first. We're not just going to simplify this left to right. There are certain rules that we need to follow. Then the last few sections focuses on percents. So we'll look at some more problems that involve determining the sale price of an item. So if something is discounted by 80% or 20%, how can we figure out what the sale price will be? As well, when we go to pay for the item, we have to pay taxes on the item. In Newfoundland, the sales tax is 15%. So we got to figure out how much taxes do we have to pay on an item and what would the total price of the item be? So let's begin this unit with some fraction review. So if you were to represent the area of the shaded region with a fraction, you would count up how many blocks were shaded, 5, and divide that by how many blocks there were in total, which is 9. So you say 5 out of 9 blocks are shaded. So the top number, which we call the numerator, represents how many are shaded, whereas the bottom number, we call the denominator, represents the whole, how many there are altogether. Now we'll look at some decimals and how we can read them properly. So let's review our place value. The number to the left of the decimal, the 0 in this case, is in the ones position. The number after the decimal, 1, that's in the tenths place. 2 is in the hundredths place, and 3 is in the thousands place. So we need to know this for when we read decimals. So for example, we're often tempted to say 0.4, but we're going to try to get into the habit of saying 4/10, as that gives more meaning as to what it represents. So you just got to say the number 4 and then look at what place value it's in, which is in the tenth spot. So for the next one, we can say that as 1 and 23 hundredths. So think about how you would read 0.67. Well, you can simply just say 67 and then look at where the last number is. That's in the hundredth spot. So we'll say 67 hundredths. And for the next one, we can say 209. And then this is in the thousands place. So 209 thousandths. And then for the last one, we would have 48 and 5/10. Now you have already looked at some common fractions like 1/2 and 1/4 and what these are as a decimal. So let's review those. 1/2 is 0.5 as a decimal, or 5/10. 1/4, now another way of saying that is 1/4. That is equal to 25 hundredths. 3/4, or 3/4, is equal to 75 hundredths. And 1/5, or 1/5, is equal to 2/10. Now the benefit of knowing some of these common fractions is that through patterns you are able to figure out other fractions, other decimal equivalents. Like 1 over 5 is 0.2, then you can probably figure out what 2 over 5 is, and 3 over 5, and 4 over 5, and so on. Now look at all the fractions on the right. You'll notice that they're all over 10 or multiples of 10. So how can we change these fractions to decimals? Well, 3 over 10 is 0.3. 23 over 100 is 0.23. So all we need to do is just move the decimal place to the left, depending on how many zeros are in the bottom. So for the first one, there's just 1 0. So I would take the decimal, which is at the end, and just move it one place to the left to put it in front of the 3. So that's how we get 0.3. 23 over 100, I got the decimal and move it 2 places to the left. So I get 0.23, which is also read as 23 hundredths, which corresponds to the fraction that we have there, 23 over 100. So now 51 over 1,000. This time we have to move the decimal 3 places. So I move it 1, 2, and I have to move it once more. So because there's no number then, you fill that in with a 0. So the way we write it is 0.051, or 51 thousandths. And now for 16 divided by 10, we just need to move the decimal one place to the left, giving us 1 6/10. So that concludes our first video in Unit 3, Fractions, Decimals, and Percents. So now you can move on to the next video in this lesson.